I think we were in the middle of introducing ourselves. So
Yeah, I think I was on last. Yeah, I'm a product manager here at Greynoise, and I'm excited to talk to you all. This is my first open forum. We've also got Greg Wells on as a panelist as well.
that's
Yeah,
right.
Greg
He
Wells.
didn't make the picture cut, but go ahead, Greg, please.
Yeah, product manager here at Greynoise as well. Looking forward to all the feedback from the community. So excited to be here.
Awesome. And if you're just joining us, we had a few minutes of technical difficulties, but you're early enough in the program that we haven't talked about anything important yet, except ourselves. So without further ado, Andrew, would you like to give us a high-level overview of what Greynoise is and what we do?
Yeah, so basically, folks, look, the internet is really, really noisy. And what that means is that pretty much every single device that's like routable on the internet, everything on the perimeter of the internet is getting blasted by internet scans, crawls, attacks all the time. And at best, this information is just distracting and like really annoying and frustrating for security people. And at worst, it's really dangerous and malicious sometimes, and you should be super freaked out about it. And so basically, Greynoise is here to solve this problem. We want to make security people more efficient by telling you what not to worry about when it warrants it. We want to help you understand where compromised devices are causing internet background noise, and we want to help you understand who's exploiting what vulnerabilities from where. And then increasingly, as we move forward, we want to do even more to like actually help you opt out of some of the more dangerous internet background noise. So we have two kind of core data sets that we collect at Greynoise. The first is our noise data, and this is our primary data source that we're collecting. We collect all of our data ourselves, and the noise data is collected from a gigantic network of passive collector sensors. You can think of them kind of like fancy honeypots, right? Fancy custom honeypots that we manage ourselves, and we take this data from thousands of places around the globe in dozens of hosting providers. So your AWSs, your Google Clouds, et cetera. We have these collector nodes that sit in all different countries and all different regions of all different data centers of all around the world. We collect like a really, really interesting picture of who's scanning, crawling, attacking the internet all the time. And you can compare that data with what you're seeing on your perimeter to figure out what you care about and what you don't. Remy's team actually spends all their time looking at this data, tagging the data, slogging through the data, writing the most wild queries on top of this data that you've ever seen. And so this is how we actually tag the data, and we give it like malicious intent, benign intent, and then we give you a little bit more classification of like, what is it doing? How long has it been doing it? What does that mean? Is it trying to exploit something? Is it a worm? Is it a crawler? What's it crawling for, right? What paths is it crawling for, et cetera, et cetera. And then the second data set that we've got down here is our RIOT data. So RIOT stands for rule it out. And you can think about it a little bit more like kind of like a list of the IP addresses that common business services use. So these are IP addresses that aren't necessarily communicating to your network. They're not scanning you. It's just the normal IP addresses of all of the benign services that you guys are probably using in all of your different networks, right? This is all of the IP addresses for Office 365, for Zoom, for Datadog, for Microsoft Update, right? Like we have, I think, close to 50 RIOT sources that are constantly enumerating these different IP addresses of all these common business services that are, again, they're totally benign. Can they be used to hurt you? Possibly, right? But that's why RIOT is not actually like a software whitelist or a network whitelist, right? This is just a time saver for you. We're trying to help our users and help our customers figure out like, hey, look, this thing belongs to Google Public DNS, right? Does that mean that it can hurt you? Like, yes, maybe in some like crazy advanced asynchronous communications attacks, probably. But can you really blame Google Public DNS for that? No. Does blocking Google Public DNS do anything for you? No. And so that's basically the point of RIOT. We just want to help you save time. The first thing you want to do when you got a boatload of logs is you just want to kind of nuke through all the stuff that you know probably isn't bad. And that's the problem that we're solving with RIOT. So at the end of the day, Greynoise is a system that's really trying to make people more efficient, identify compromised systems, and enumerate who's exploiting what out on the internet. And I think, Supriya, I may have like totally clobbered the slide that you're going to have on this, but you can if you want, you can move over to the next slide.
No, that's great. And the only thing I'll add is that we did our last open forum on RIOT. So if this is your first ever open forum, we host all of the previous videos on our docs. So I will pass a link around and you can watch previous open forums if that's something that you're interested in.
Cool. I'm really briefly just going to recap these three use cases, and then I'm going to hand it right back over to Supriya. So the long and the short is that you can use Greynoise right now for 3 use cases as a free user. Okay, and the very first one is, hey, I'm a security person. I got hit with an alert, or I've got a bunch of NetFlow, or I've got a bunch of logs, or something weird is happening to my perimeter. I'm going to look up the IP address that's doing it in Greynoise's free web interface or in the free community API, and it's going to tell me if this thing's hitting everybody on the entire internet or if it's just hitting me. And then it's going to give me like a little bit more information. Okay, so you're telling me that it's hitting everybody on the entire internet, but how do I know that I can ignore this thing? And we'll say, well, you can ignore this thing because it's Shodan, right? Shodan's not out to hurt you specifically, right? It's just scanning the internet. It's a security company. That's what they do, right? Or we'll say, hey, look, this IP address is malicious, right? It is bad, it is attacking you, but it's not attacking you specifically. It's attacking everyone, right? So maybe care about the ones that are special and unique to you. One of our kind of like theses at Greynoise is that there's certain things that only humans can do. There's certain jobs in security that only humans can do. And you want to spend as little time as possible wading through low value alerts, high volume, low value alerts as humanly possible. So you can use Greynoise's free product to do that. The second use case we've got here is identifying compromised systems. Look, as a byproduct of all the data that we collect, we know where a ton of compromised devices are all around the internet. We know where about probably 1 to 200,000 unique IP addresses are every day, with like a pretty rapid temporal drift. So that means that we do identify, hundreds of thousands of compromised systems every day, but it's not our primary focus, because in this case, this is useful for our users, it's useful for some of our customers, but it's not our focus. It's just a byproduct of what we do, and we want to get that information to our users just in the event that it's useful. You can use Greynoise's free alerts feature to set up your IP ranges for your network so that if for any reason you ever happen to join that list of compromised systems, we'll send you an email right away. And you can do that for free right now. And then the third thing here is identification of emerging threats. Look, we've all seen this movie before, and Remy's going to talk about this much more intelligently than I'd ever be able to do. Look, a vulnerability comes out, super bad, CVE, 1, 2, 3, blah, blah, blah. Shell, shock, bleed, heart, eternal, blue, whatever. And basically everyone freaks out. People are exploiting it out on the internet. Nobody knows what to do. Maybe there's a patch available, maybe there's not, right? So when this happens, like, you can use Greynoise a lot of the time, not all of the time, a lot of the time, you can use Greynoise to figure out who's exploiting those vulnerabilities, where they're exploited from scale, and basically get a list of IP addresses that you can either triage, you can hunt for, or you can block. And so these are kind of the 3 core use cases for Greynoise. So hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have questions about any of this stuff, please feel free to pop them into the chat or just wait until the end of the session, and we'll be happy to answer those questions.
Yes, absolutely. And so kind of like segueing into this, we're going to spend the rest of this time talking about our third use case, which is seeing and understanding emerging threats. So without further ado, let's talk about Log4Shell. I'm going to pass it over to Remy, and I'm sorry in advance for any of the like dog helicopter meme like triggering event stuff that this might bring up, but hopefully it's good. Remy, take it away.
Sure. So we're going to talk about Log4Shell. We're going to do a high level overview of the early timeline. I think that should be the next slide. Wonderful. So this is a graph that we generated within the first few days of the Log4Shell incident. As a bit of background for those of you not aware of Log4Shell, it's a vulnerability in the very, very ubiquitous Log4j logging library used by many, many Java applications. The vulnerability ultimately lies in the parsing of a string, which allows for remote loading of Java classes, leading to remote code execution. So Apache first identifies a vulnerability. They release a patch on the 6th. A few days go by, and then we start to observe the initial exploitation. The way that this presented itself was people were just stuffing this malicious string in every single possible HTTP header and just scanning the entire internet. Very spray and pray tactics, just seeing what they can get. 48 hours pass, and we start to see the diversity of these payloads start to increase dramatically. We start to see some more custom stuff, as well as shortly thereafter, payloads that appear to be targeting specific applications where it might not be explicitly an HTTP header that's logged. They're looking for a non-surface level logging feature of an application that they can trigger. Next slide, please. So when we talk about payload diversity, I actually went back in time for these slides to see if I could find any new payloads. And by doing so, we clustered about 5 million Log4j related activity. And first and foremost, we got them all. We actually tagged all of them manually prior to doing this clustering work. So that was a huge, huge win. So when we talk about payload diversity, we start seeing things that will bypass web application firewall rules and tagging engines using string interpolation. So in the top one, you see env nan. That coerces to nothing, a blank string, but it will throw off detection rules so that the exploit still fires, but you can't explicitly detect it. In the third one, where you see a post request and a header that says transfer encoding chunked, followed by a 0, if you're familiar with this syntax, this message is actually sent in 2 parts. It's chunked. So this may be triggering not the logger, but the error messaging, because Log4j library supports both logging as well as logging error messages. And those are 2 separate code paths. So this is what we're talking about when we start to look into payload diversity. Next slide, please. For application-specific payloads, we started seeing some stuff targeted at, as you can see here, vSphere, some stuff involving Global Protect login, as well as in that top left one, you can see xBluecoat VIA. This is a common Java-based proxy service that a lot of people have on their edge. So when we started seeing these, we start to realize that people have gone they've gone past the initial surface level, like spray and pray, let's just see what we get. We start to see people looking into how vulnerable applications use this logging library and how they can get past that surface level and start to trigger these bugs and get remote code execution. Next slide, please. We did a collaboration with Randori, which is an offensive security company. We shared a lot of information with them. They shared a lot of information with us. There was a lot of cloudy, muddied waters in terms of what mitigations actually worked in terms of Log4j. There was people saying, you know, if you have this Java version, you're okay. If you use this version of the library, you're okay. If you have these command line parameters to when you're launching the application, you're okay. And not all of that was really clear. And then a few days later, a second vulnerability because the patch was incomplete came out, and all that just kind of went out the window. So in summary, there was only one thing, and this is corroborated by Randori in their offensive engagements. Default deny outbound was the only thing that really tripped them up consistently. Blocking this traffic in terms of knowing where your vulnerable applications lie and not letting them talk to hosts that you don't know who they are. So blocking does work, and it's effective, and it's the one commonality, concrete variable that you can control and actually have it be effective. That's it. That's the list. That's the only thing that was actually concrete throughout this entire scenario that worked. And that's a jumping off point for how we continue this conversation. And I believe I'm passing it off to Andrew.
Right, but we're really just talking about lessons learned from this whole situation. And, you know, speaking a little bit and kind of going over what Remy was talking about, like this was a really important learning experience for us, because not only were we kind of like early stage, like it was Luna Security, right, Remy, that identified the vulnerability first. They published the research paper. Yeah,
they were the first ones to publish the research paper, correct?
Yeah, so Luna Security obviously identified Apache Log4j shell, that's what they called it. And then, you know, we started seeing traffic really early, and then we saw obviously like insane skyrocketing of scanning. And as Remy might have mentioned, like there's no distinguishing factor between scanning and attempting. And so obviously it's created a huge, huge noise problem, probably on a scale that we hadn't seen before. But Mike, I want to talk or let you talk about the kind of lessons learned from a product perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Remy and Supriya. So as we were kind of in the midst of this, we were getting a lot of inbound interest and questions because there weren't a lot of answers to questions like, how big is this vuln? Should I be worried about it? Where is it happening? Who's scanning for this? And we had a lot of information about that, but at the time, our product wasn't able to easily give that information to people in a way that they could do something with it, right? There's kind of two things in my experience when those big vulnerabilities come out. You need information to figure out, hey, how worried should I be? What should I do about this? And then you need time, right? Time to put in mitigations, to do those hunts, to do all those kinds of things. And so we kind of tried to figure it out on the fly. And what we did was we published a GitHub gist, which is just, that was literally just a list of IP addresses. And that list of IP addresses was available to anybody because again, we think it's really important to be good, just good people when it comes to security. And so we want to make sure that even people who aren't our customers can be safer on the internet. And then what we did with that was, and what people we found were doing that was kind of two general things. They were hunting for those IP addresses, taking that list and looking in their logs, as well as adding it to block lists. And those are the kind of the two major things. There were probably lots of other things that were being done at that time. And so those two things in our postmortem, we looked at and said, hey, why don't we make this easier for people to do without having to move heaven and earth? And that's kind of where the idea for Gray Noise Trends came out. The other thing that people wanted to see and that people found very helpful in what we'd gotten for feedback was things like that graph that Remy had shown, right? Be able to visually understand what's going on here and when did important events happen? Like when did the CVE get published? When did people start scanning for this? All those kinds of things to give folks the kind of operational context they need to make the right decisions kind of in that moment. So let's jump to the next slide here. So if you've seen, if those of you who are lucky enough to have seen Andrew's talk at Blue Hat, he showed this slide, and I love the slide. Don't worry that it's an eye chart. This is all of the celebrity vulnerabilities that have existed over time, things that got their own name. And you can tell by the start point in 19 just how ridiculous that got, right? And I know people love to name things for press, but a lot of these are really legitimate security issues that make responders and security people's lives hard, right? So this is happening more. And again, this was another driver for wanting to make sure that when these emergency things happen, people are prepared and they can do what they need to do to get over the hump there. So yeah, let's go to the next one.
Oh yeah, and I'll just cover that the way that it's shown, it's not symbolic of anything. It's just there's a lot of text. So
we had to cram so many vulnerabilities in that this was the only way that it was going to scale.
Yeah, good point, right? It's not about this one was a bigger vuln or anything like that. Supriya, let's go to the next slide. So like I talked about, right? What we wanted to do was we wanted to create something within the application, within the platform that can help people solve those problems. Both the, oh shit, this is an emergency, I got to do something about it right now, the Log4js of the world, but also an ability to be able to look at things that we've tagged CVEs and say like, what's going on with this? What's the trend? Is there more of the scanning going on? Is there less of this scanning going on, right? It could be any of those things. So what we've got is we want to be able to show people what the trend is around that tag, provide them as much context as possible with information about when the CVE was published, POC available, those kinds of things, and then really give people a tool to be able to do something with it, right? And that's kind of that last bullet here, which is the idea of action on this intelligence, right? There are two major areas of things that we saw people do and we wanted to enable people to do, and that was block and hunt, right? So it probably makes sense for us to just dive in the visualizer and show you all what we mean, because picture 1,000 words, yada, yada, yada. And now Supriya is making.
Can you guys just see my screen?
Very small. No, we see the
Very
whole.
small.
We see the whole desktop.
All right.
Passwords.txt. What was that?
Very important. Let's see.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, that should be good. And again, you all can follow along at home. Like this is open right now. It's released. But the idea behind what we're trying to do here is look at the left side for context, the right side for action. So for every one of our tags, you'll see a 3, 10, and 30-day trend of the number of unique IP addresses that we've seen trying to, that we're tagging with this IP, which in the case of CVEs means scanning for or attempting to exploit this vulnerability. We've got the timeline on the bottom, so you can kind of in your mind figure out, hey, how does this relate to like this 30 days? How does it relate to the kind of core formative events that have happened with respect to this tag? Patches released, POCs, like I said, that kind of thing. And then in the upper right, where it says actions, this is where you can actually do something with it. And so there's really 2 ways to do it. One is you can just download the IP address list. And that was what we were offering when during Log4j. And that was kind of a quick, fast, and dirty way to get out, here are the IP addresses scanning for this activity. What we realized is a bunch of the next-gen firewalls, specifically Fortinet, Palo, and Cisco, have a capability to basically consume a URL and regularly update that. So it's not such a manual process to keep that noise off of your network and off of the backs of your SOC analysts and everybody else who's having to respond to this incident, right? So it's the same data, just presented in 2 different ways for kind of 2 different problems to be solved. And if you actually look at that URL, Supriya, if you want to copy that and just literally open it, we can kind of show what this might look like, right? Because the idea is, it's just that, right? It is a new line separated list of IP addresses, because that's the format that those firewalls need to be able to consume the data in. So yeah, so that's kind of what you're going to see. And if you post one of those into your firewall, you can set an update cadence between like 5 minutes, an hour, all the way up to like a day, to try and keep the protection up. Because one of the things that we found when we were doing some research around this is the internet is noisy, but there's a lot of variety and cycling in that noise. So if you put in a list and you don't touch it for 2 weeks, the value of that list really goes down. And so that's what we're trying to do here for everybody. One of the other things that I want to point out is this capability is available to our paying customers, but it's also available to the community. The difference primarily, and I think, Supriya, I may be going ahead a slide here if you want to jump it to that, is the amount of access that you have, right? So community members can have 1 tag at a time. So this is a great way to kind of test it out. Like, don't believe us that blocking this tag X or tag Y can save you time and energy. Just pop it in your firewall and test it. You know, put a host listing on port 22 behind it, start blocking the traffic, and see what you see. Right? I know there are one of my favorite things about the Gray Noise community is just how many smart people there are who are doing this kind of tinkering just generally. So we would love to hear like, hey, how's it working for you guys? But yeah, that's the primary difference between what you get with community and what you get with being what we call an investigate customer, which is one of our 2 product offerings, right? If you're an investigate customer, you can have access to all of those block lists, right? Because then you can kind of deploy it in more of an enterprise form to really solve a much larger problem. Yeah, let's go next slide. So we're releasing this into the world and hoping that it's well received, but as is always the case, you never get everything right on the first try. So we've been thinking about, hey, what else could we do here? What other things might we offer? We've got a bunch of things that we're thinking about, right? What and how interesting is this from an API perspective? Would people want to consume it that way? We have this idea of being able to subscribe to tags in a way that makes that more flexible. Block lists that are a little bit more robust. We're also looking at a number of other things like trends around geo, right? I know that at least some of you know we had published a quick turnaround thing on all the IP addresses that are targeting just Ukraine, and we've got a link to that. I think Supriya can probably pop that in the chat here. But we're looking to kind of expand on that because we've seen there be real value in being able to answer those kinds of questions, like what IPs are targeting just a country or a couple of countries. The other thing that this is for, and we're kind of at the end of the presentation part of this, is we desperately want to hear what else we should be doing, right? Community is so important to us. And it was really the community that helped drive this feature, right? Just the feedback we were getting on Twitter and people saying like, hey, we need this. We heard that and said, hey, let's do something to help out here. So with that, I'm going to kind of wrap up. And I would say, feel free to pop into the Q&A section and ask questions. I'm looking at that Q&A section, and we kind of all are, and we'll either answer just by typing or we'll answer it live if there are questions about that. So I am looking in those. If anybody wants to raise their hand and have questions that way too.
And in the meantime, while you guys are thinking about questions, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the stuff that we're going to be working on moving forward. So let's see, problems that exist right now. We've got like a known tag degradation issue at the moment because we've been like adding a ton of sensors and our tagging engine has not been keeping up as well as we want it to. And it's been causing us pain and causing you guys pain. So that's like kind of like top of mind for us at the moment. So for those that are in here right now that are Gray Noise users, if you've noticed less of your data getting tagged or fewer tags, like we know, and we're working on it. So we're fixing that right now. We've got the engineering team on it. Let's see, we've got a hand up. So let me go ahead and call, Ryan. I can't say your last name. I'm sorry, man.
It's all right. Thank you. I have three points. It's quick. So the first one is with the idea of a newsletter, which I already sent over my ideas to Priya. But with Remy, as you guys pointed out back in December with Randora, you stated, hey, we have this information that a default outbound any would mitigate log4j, log4shell. And on your post, that information is nowhere in sight. So this is just me pushing you guys to say, hey, to be the good people mantra, to link that data or talk about the reactive position that community users or Gray Noise investigate enterprise users need to take on their network, because not everyone may know. Two, I've noticed on my network with blacklisted email connections that I can take a whole 100 or even 1,000 hosts and throw those into a Gray Noise analysis. And not all of them, but a handful of them come back and they're matched as noisy inbound. And they're only being labeled or tagged as port scan 25. It would be interesting if Gray Noise internally could set up some spam traps just to analyze that data and see where that takes Gray Noise. Thirdly, the same concept as with Riot with tiers, but with this new trend product is trying to tag or quantify how noisy or malicious a host is compared to the whole general data set of Gray Noise data. All right.
Yeah. So, okay. In no particular order, on the latter, or on the very last one, we have a dimensionality problem with our data, which is to say that like we understand that it's extremely multidimensional. There are things like velocity, pervasiveness, volume, patterns like that Gray Noise, our data represents ourselves, but we are doing a terrible job at actually showing that data to our users right now. And frankly, it's because we didn't know that people would care as much as they did. And based on like your feedback and similar feedback that we've gotten from a lot of other people, we've had this come up quite a few times where people have basically said like, hey, it's great that this thing is scanning the internet, but like, how hard is it scanning the internet? Is it scanning the internet a lot? Did it send you like 3 packets? Like, what's the deal? So that's something that we're acutely aware of, but it's really good to hear from you directly, just that that's something that's top of mind. We've got advanced analytics feature that's coming out later this year, and that's basically going to address some of those things. I'm not sure like if necessarily it's going to address all of them, but it's going to make this better. Secondly, on let's see, setting up spam traps. We're actually very likely to do a pretty major re-architecture this year that's going to make us doing stuff like that way, 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 way easier. So I can't commit to it right now, but I am prepared to say that like some of the re-architecture that we're likely to do as a result of some of the work that we have to do for what we're doing right now will make us doing things like that a lot easier. And then initially just on providing better, more concrete steps on what defenders can do for vulnerabilities like Log4j. I think we sometimes have a tendency to take certain pieces for granted because of how well certain parts of the security community react to our response to things, which is to say that I think we probably can do a better job of showing people, like when people come to a page and they're looking for expertise, breaking down more, going into more detail on kind of, hey, this is what this vulnerability is. These are the things that you can think about for what to do about it. And then here's what you can use Gray Noise to do. And I think just breaking that down a little bit further, I hear you completely because we're thinking about like, well, what can we do? What are we uniquely positioned to do? Like what unique value can we add? And if people are viewing Gray Noise as a, I don't want to say arbiter, but as an organization that's like pretty dedicated to providing like concrete vulnerability remediation steps, we want to make sure to either fulfill people's obligations in that way or set really clear to people that like, hey, look, part of this is something that we don't do. This part is something that we do. And we really need to draw that line in the sand much more quickly. So for what it's worth, look, I really appreciate the feedback. Hopefully, Ryan, I answered your questions. Did I?
Yes. I was just trying to push, what I'm seeing and what I deal with, and maybe some cool analytics for your company.
Awesome, Ryan. Hey, look, thanks. I feel like you've asked a question before because I recognize your voice. I don't know if that's weird. Anyways, thanks.
Yes, sir. Yeah. I'm on these constantly, and I'm usually the first person to raise my hand. And normally when I start talking, other people start raising their hand.
Hey, that's perfect. I hope you keep doing it. I hope you do it next time. I look forward to talking to you exactly 4 months from now, being the first person to ask the questions again. Thanks, Ryan. Jeremy, Dr. Kepner, I saw your hand go up. Please.
Can you hear me okay?
We can. Dr. Kepner, you're coming in loud and clear.
Thank you very much. And I apologize if there's a little background noise here. So just again, for those of you who don't know, I'm Jeremy Kepner at MIT. I lead supercomputing at MIT, and we've been collaborating with Gray Noise. And I just wanted to make a quick comment that, which was mentioned earlier about the need to kind of refresh this list of IPs. Certainly what we're doing, comparing Gray Noise data, and we have some papers we'll publish on this, relatively soon. We'll post them very soon. But yes, people, the scanning and other things does rotate fairly quickly, the sources. And so, refreshing every couple of weeks is definitely, I think, strongly recommended. And so I just wanted to reinforce that comment for people out there who are using this Gray Noise product. And I think it's great that they're allowing people to have these more dynamic lists of IPs. And again, I encourage people to refresh frequently. So that was my main comment there.
Thank you, Dr. Kepner. I'm going to expand on that a little bit more because I agree with everything that you just said. And also, it's been awesome working with you guys. So separately, basically one of our big major takeaways from Gray Noise, and the reason why Gray Noise exists and is more well-positioned to solve this problem than we believe anybody else on planet Earth, is because the data is psychodynamic. It has a very rapid temporal drift. The data today is quantifiably pretty useless tomorrow. Not completely useless, but it's 25% less useful tomorrow. And so that continues every few days. One of the reasons why threat intelligence firms have a really hard time with internet background noise related things is that their data pipelines are not capable of moving as quickly as they need to move because they're used to kind of moving over longer running indicators that are not going to shift as rapidly as people who scan the internet for a multitude of different reasons. So quantifiably, based on some of the research that Remy, Nate, and the research team did for supporting some of the work that we've been doing, the we've found that there's a 25% temporal drift day over day. And so that means that the data tomorrow is only going to be 75% of what it was the day before. And then that's going to keep on rotating. So basically, all of this is to say that the refresh is extremely important, guys. It's really important. The other part is to say that, like, I could give every single person in here the entire list of like all IPs that Gray Noise knows about, every single bit of it, and like it's going to be worthless in like a week, right? So it's one of the reasons that like a constant use of Gray Noise is, and this is obviously self-serving of me to say, but a constant use of Gray Noise is the only way that you can actually get the value of it, and it's why we're kind of very heavily API first, and why we always really push people to get as close to automation as they can, because you really do need to be like checking and pulling the data all the time. So anyways, I just wanted to really reiterate what Dr. Kepner was saying. Dr. Kepner, thank you for coming on. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for making the comment.
Oh, Andrew, and just if I can ask, put a couple asks in.
Yeah.
So one, I would say that I don't know if your list could be more specific down to the port level. So just not just say block an IP, but block a port, because I think if we can become more surgical in our firewall rulings, that will help us, avoid collateral damage. So again, I think not just the IP, but the port that we want to block might be good. And then I'll also just say, I hope you guys expand. I think if you increased, your honey farm by an order of magnitude, you'd see an order of magnitude more stuff. And so I encourage you to do that. So those are my final two comments, and I'll mute and let others chime in.
Thank you. So on the last point, I couldn't agree more. Like we need more money. On the very first point, basically, if the dream is to get as surgical as humanly possible, because IP addresses, networks on the internet are really crazy. And if we can be like much more prescriptive, ultra prescriptive in the things that we're going to say, like just don't allow this host to talk to you on this port and you're probably going to be good, then that's the way to do it. A lot of modern firewalls and dynamic block lists have a harder time with that, but we can solve that problem. That's a solvable problem. Jeremy, Dr. Kepner, thank you again for hopping on. I really appreciate it a lot. Aiden Mitchell, your hand went up. What's up? Oh, and I think your hand went right back down. All right, that's fine.
Aiden asked a question. We have quite a few in our Q&As. So for folks that have their hands raised, hang tight. Aiden, I see that you have your hand up. I'm going to let you ask your question verbally.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, I messed it up. Yeah, I asked about the notification system, and Mike responded. I just want to respond to his response. Because, I use Twitter generally for finding things that happen in real time when something breaks, or like Log4Shell in December. That's how I found out. I'm wondering if you guys could implement some sort of notification system to just send an email or an alert in Gray Noise saying like, hey, heads up, we've seen a massive uptick in this. Here's some actionable things, add this to your firewall, watch for inbound, outbound, just rules, I guess, we can create at the edge of our networks to fix things that happen very quickly, like Log4Shell, because that graph that we saw, it spiked very quickly. I don't know how I would want to receive those alerts, to be honest. Slack probably makes sense. A newsletter or an email, but it would be interesting to see just real-time alerting from you guys.
So Aiden, one of my really big goals moving forward that I took away from Log4j is that Twitter is like one of our most valuable communication assets for us to get as close to people as humanly possible with the largest reach humanly possible. But something that is extremely important for us to do is to get as much off of Twitter and centralized into our platform as possible without necessarily leaving Twitter out and high and dry. It just has limitations, right? And so I think that you're not the first person to ask this. I think it's a fantastic idea for us to basically have a set of things that under the right criteria will push that information out to people via email, RSS, Slack notification, push notification, whatever. We've got a multitude of different options. I think that that's a fantastic idea. And I actually think that the only thing that's in between us and doing that right is understanding what's the most useful for folks. Because personally, I don't hate anything any more than when a company sends me a message that I don't care about, right? And so like if you're eating up my time and I'm looking at it, like I get pissed. And so something that we're really sensitive to at Gray Noise is like we want to make sure all of our outbound communications are tactically useful. And so the most important thing in between us and doing that is figuring out like the three things that more than anything are the three interrupts or the three occurrences or the three things that can happen, and then what information you would need in order to do that. So I'm not going to belabor that right now. I would love to follow up with you about what some of those things would be after you've had a chance to think about it and I'm done, gabbing. So anyways, I just wanted to say thanks for the question. Hopefully does that address the question, Aiden?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Obviously, setting criteria for when an alert should go out is difficult because it's unique to every single customer and every single user. And I understand your point of a newsletter better be helpful if I'm getting it kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense.
So and then just one more part here is like one of the big objectives of us strategically at the company moving forward is to formulate a stronger tag ontology that we can use to do more with inheritance on tech. I'm getting a little bit abstract, but if we're able to do good ontological organization of tags, we will be able to allow our users and our customers to tell us a little bit more about what they care about and to allow some of our insights to automatically inherit like, well, this is a vulnerability in this technology and this technology is actually like falls inside of this product family. And that's a product family that this group of people uses heavily in their environment, which means without you necessarily having to explicitly subscribe to a thing that doesn't exist yet, we may be able to basically organize our data in a way that is going to solve for some of those things without creating too much of a burden on our research team. And so that's basically the way that we're really thinking about that. So I can't commit to like when we're going to be able to have that done, but that's something that's really important to us because not having it has caused us a lot of pain. So like building that out, and that's a hard problem that like honestly most security companies really mess up. So it's something that we want to take really seriously and be very thoughtful about. So anyways, Aiden, thanks for the question. Appreciate you a lot. Hope to see you next time.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Ewan Gardner, what's up?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I got you. What's up, Ewan?
Hi. Yeah, so this might be a bit of a noob question because I'm not too familiar with your product, but I really like the tags. The area of research I'm involved in is kind of looking at more nation state activity, attacks against critical national infrastructure. How could your product help me do that? Is there any way I could, for example, search for attacks that seem to be targeting specific industry sectors like energy or that kind of stuff? Or do you have tags where I could identify infrastructure that's known to be associated with APTs, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so Ewan, I'm going to product pitch our enterprise stuff as little as humanly possible right now because I have like a religious zealotry for not product pitching too hard for paid stuff in the open forum. I'll be as succinct as humanly possible. The things that Gray Noise will be able to do for a person who works in a job like yours is if we have sensors in the country that you care about, we can tell you when people are specifically scanning that country or exploiting hosts in that country and not scanning or exploiting any hosts outside of that country, which is a very strong indicator that something is geopolitically motivated in some capacity or another, or geographically motivated in some capacity or another. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Remy, Nate, Constantine, Kimber have built a lot of incredible tags around IoT and OT devices and ICS devices. So depending on what the technology is, we may have a tag for it. If we don't, we would love to hear from you about the technologies that we should try to get some tags up for that might be helpful. And then on the very last part, Gray Noise will probably never have data on stuff that APT groups are doing. only because it's outside of our purview. We really like to stay focused on this problem. But what we love is when partners and other security companies make that data publicly available so that we can look in Gray Noise to see like, wow, what of the stuff that we're already seeing can we quickly associate with a known APT group, right? And we've actually seen this happen before, but it's a little bit more rare. And I can tell you that on that last point, unmasking and attributing APT groups is probably something that we're never going to do. But those first two are some things that we do right now. How we can do it better, I would love to meet up with you at some point and just basically brainstorm the data that we've got and get a couple ideas from you of things that we could do to be useful. So Ewan, hopefully that answers your question. Thank you for coming on. I hope you'll become more familiar with Gray Noise. I'm glad that you like our tags. I also like our tags.
Brilliant. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ewan. I appreciate it a lot. Renee, I don't know if I'm saying your name correctly. Renee or Rennie, I'd love to hear from you. All right.
So Andrew, before we continue this, we do have a bunch of questions from our Q&A.
Oh yeah, can you read them out to me, Supriya?
Yeah. Oh, it looks like Renee, your hand's back up. I know you asked a question in the Q&A, but I'll let you ask it verbally, or we can read it off, whichever you prefer. So Renee asked, in Splunk, you can enter URL to allow Splunk to import the blacklist every couple of hours without any manual doing, which I think is a question. I might have just missed the question part, but actually, does anyone want to talk about the Splunk integration? I know we have Brad here as well who can answer that question in the chat.
So I was going to say, yeah, Brad, if you can run interference on the chat for the specifics. What I will do, like really quickly, like the Splunk integration is you can use basically all of our API primitives and solve for most of our use cases with basically automating a lot of the tasks that Gray Noise helps with if you are getting sick of copying and pasting stuff into our web interface, right? So this is basically scan through all these logs, enrich all these logs, do something with it, and include, and you can include that stuff in your workflows that you've got for things like alerts, triage, et cetera. So that's the majority of our Splunk app functionality, as well as some dashboards and things that'll give you a little bit more context. We'll drop our Splunk documentation. Our Splunk is probably one of our richest richest integrations that we have. So you can check that out, and you can look to see exactly what you can do with the Gray Noise Splunk integration. So hopefully that answers your question. I know that it was a little bit high level, but I just wanted to talk through the use case a little bit. Supriya, what's up?
Yeah. Is there any recommendation or better approach than focusing on IP domain, et cetera, IOCs, maybe general detection rule on the strings instead, maybe other suggestions? I'd really like Remy to answer this if that's something that you feel comfortable doing, Remy.
So let me pull up that question because it's a little bit long. Can you repeat?
Yeah, is there any recommendation or better approach other than focusing on IP domain or any type of IOCs, maybe general detection rule on the strings, other suggestions?
Yeah, so that's actually how we write the tags. The information that is available through the visualizer and the API, that is aimed to enable defenders in identifying the traffic as well as associating it with the tag. The full information of the requests and much, much more information is what we use in the tagging engine in the back end. We want to enable defenders in order to identify and defend their network and correctly identify network traffic. However, we don't want to make that information freely available so that it can be used for malicious purposes, such as writing an offensive tool. So for the background for that, the tags that we use and the information that is provided on the front end is aimed purely at defenders so that they can utilize it in defending their network. The information as it relates to the full content of, say, an HTTP post request, which is the body would not be available on the visualizer front end. That's something where that could easily be weaponized. And when we're talking about emerging threats, making sure that that we're enabling our community and enabling defenders to do their best job while not kind of providing something that could be malused, that's something that we focus on. As far as indicators for different attributes like RDNS, domain, IP, we try to consolidate that information as much as possible and make sure that that's easily available for the security community. And even though we try to condense it, we have a very, very dense information context page for every single IP. I hope that answers the question. If not, please let me know.
Thanks, Remy. There is another question that says, can you shed some light on the unknown feed that you provide? Are all of those IPs spoofable? How does an IOC end up in that feed? And Mike actually was the one who said he wanted to answer, but Remy, I see your hands up too. So both of you want to take a crack at it?
Remy, you are much better placed to speak to that.
Sure. So when you talk about the unknown feed, that is a field labeled intention. So we have 3 intentions: benign, unknown, and malicious. Unknown is the category that doesn't fall into either of those. We see that IP scanning the entire internet, and we know that they're doing it, but we can't necessarily identify an intent. It may just be internet backscatter noise. Unknown is one of the largest categories of intent that we have on Gray Noise, but we know that it's scanning every IP on the internet. When you talk about spoofability, that is actually a different field. So if you go into our visualizer and you search for intention unknown, there's an additional field that you can filter by for spoofable, which is a Boolean value of true or false. And that'll let you know what unknown actors are scanning the internet that have completed a full TCP handshake that are not spoofable. If you filter that category for spoofability, you get a much larger data set, but it's lower quality. The fact that those are individual fields within our visualizer lets you filter on what you need in order to figure out, was this spoofable? What is its intention? I believe that answers the question.
Mike, did you want to add anything to that?
Only that one of the things I love about our research team is we are very, very careful to not be wrong. And so we will default to identifying something as unknown if we can't clearly classify it, right? So as we are adding tags all the time, and as we add new tags that clearly connote malicious activity, those will get classified as that. But being right is extremely important to us because we know people make decisions based on our data.
Thank you. And then I know we're kind of bumping up against time here. Shreyas, you asked about potential research collaborations. As you know, that's definitely in our wheelhouse. Absolutely. In fact, I owe you an email. It's currently sitting in my inbox. You can expect to hear from me today. But as you saw with Dr. Kepner as well, we are more than open to collaborating. You can reach out to me. I'll put all my contact information in the chat in a second, but yes, absolutely. And then the final question is, can we get darknet intelligence from Gray Noise? I have one use case. If my organization domain is xyz.com, that I can get intelligence from Gray Noise if my domain identified in suspicious breach on dark web.
Unfortunately not. So basically Gray Noise doesn't do anything with dark web intelligence in really almost any capacity. And I could give you some recommendations of people who are really good at it, but not us. Remy, what's up?
I was going to elaborate on that. Have I Been Pwned is a wonderful research resource for that. You can actually set your entire top level domain using a DNS TXT pointer and be notified if anyone within your organization has showed up in a breach. As far as dark web database dumps and credentials, that is a largely manual process and is not something that comes inbound we're able to detect automatically. There are companies that are specific to that, and that is not something that we observe in terms of internet traffic hitting our perimeter.
Thank you, Remy. Shameless plug. I know there's another company, SpyCloud. I use their personal consumer product. Like personally, I'm a customer of it. I give them like whatever, $50 a month or whatever it is. I'm not sure. And their product is amazing also. So those are two that you could check out. Supriya, are we at time?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I have dropped two pretty important links in the chat. The first is our community Slack, which is open for you to join. You can send it to whoever you want. We've got like a couple hundred people in there, which is great. People are really open with information and like indicator sharing, which is just kind of unheard of, which is awesome. And the second link is my Calendly. So like I said, like a lot of you I've had the pleasure of getting to chat with and email back and forth with. It's really, really important for our records that you actually set up time to speak with me, because then I directly take those conversations and feed them into like discussions that we have internally that then turn into products like this. So please, please, please book time with me. We can talk specifically about trends, but we can talk about anything else that you want from Gray Noise or want to see. So please do that. I see we have 2 more hands, but more or less everyone's welcome to drop. We can hang out here. I'm going to stop recording. And yeah, thanks so much everyone for your time.
Thank you guys all so much for joining. We really appreciate it a lot.